At my daughter's beach wedding, her fiancé smirked and said, "Pay $4 million for the wedding or disappear forever." I blinked. My daughter added, "Or enjoy being alone in a nursing home." I sipped my champagne, smiled and whispered, "You forgot one thing." Their faces went pale. Moments later, chaos erupted, and I hadn't lifted a finger. "Good day, friends. Brew your tea. You're in for a compelling story." Margaret Reynolds stood at the very edge of the beach venue, a glass of champagne in hand. The sunset painted the ocean in warm golden hues. A gentle breeze tugged at the white tablecloths and the hem of her dress. Yet, despite the celebration around her, she felt like a stranger. Everything was lavish, a dream wedding right out of a glossy magazine. But no one had been waiting for her. No one came to greet her. No one embraced her. She had arrived 3 hours before the ceremony, alone. The taxi driver, lifting her modest suitcase, had said kindly, "Looks like a beautiful place. Must be a big wedding." "My daughter's," Margaret replied, trying to keep pride in her voice. She wore a neat pale blue dress, the best she could afford. She had been anxious to look presentable, but the moment she walked down the path from the entrance, she felt it. This place was not meant for her. Women in designer gowns, men in tailored suits, waiters offering sparkling wine from silver trays. Everyone mingled with an effortless air, as if they all belonged. Everyone except her. Margaret searched for Rachel, her daughter. Rachel had asked her to come early to help with the setup, but apparently no one had expected her. After 15 minutes of wandering the venue, she finally spotted a white silk robe. Rachel, surrounded by bridesmaids, snapping selfies in her bridal dressing gown. "Mom, where have you been?" were the first words Margaret heard. No hello, no hug. "I said, be here by 4. "I arrived exactly at 4, Margaret replied cautiously. Rachel glanced at her dress, appraisingly. "Well, I guess it's okay. Just please don't do anything weird today. Try not to embarrass us, all right?" Margaret felt something cold squeeze inside her, but she nodded, silent. Not for the first time. "Where can I change, or maybe leave my bag somewhere?" she asked. "You're already dressed. Just go see the coordinator. She'll show you where you're sitting. Table 19, behind the column. A girl will take you there." The coordinator girl did indeed escort her. She smiled politely, but her eyes held a touch of pity. "Would you like some water, Mrs. Reynolds?" "Yes, please," Margaret managed. While they poured her water, she stared at the wedding arch, the flowers, the waiters. All of it cost someone hundreds of thousands. And here she was, standing off to the side, like a random guest. Yet once she had taken Rachel from doctor to doctor, worked triple shifts to pay for her college, bought her winter boots on credit. And now her daughter was ashamed of her, pushing her aside. The ceremony started on time. Rachel walked down the sandy aisle in a dazzling dress, lace, train, her hair styled to perfection. Her groom Andrew smiled beside her. He came from a wealthy family, worked in real estate in New York, the son of respectable people. Margaret hadn't liked him from the start. Too slick, too sure of himself, and cold. At the ceremony, Margaret was seated in the second-to-last row, next to some of Andrew's co-workers whom she barely knew. No one even asked her how she was related to the bride. After the vows, the photos, and the reception buffet, Andrew approached her. He held 2 glasses of champagne. "Mrs. Reynolds, how are you? Enjoying everything?" "Thank you. It's beautiful," she replied, accepting the glass. "I'm glad," he said. "You're aware, right, that there was talk of your contribution to the expenses?" "Excuse me?" she asked, confused. "Rachel said you'd be able to cover part of the costs. There's just one sum left, $4 million. I assume for a woman who invested so much in her daughter, that's not a problem." Margaret nearly dropped her glass. 4 million? I don't have that kind of money. Andrew smiled, but it wasn't a real smile, more like a mask. Let's just say, we did a lot for you. Rachel went against her family's wishes. Your background isn't exactly marketable, so this is the least you could do. Rachel arrived just then. Mom, Andrew already explained, right? You'll help, won't you? She leaned closer, her voice a sharp whisper. Or maybe think about that retirement home in Florida. Cozy place. Quiet. Margaret said nothing. She looked at both of them, at her daughter's face, now devoid of warmth, and at the man who had never respected her. Then she raised her glass to her lips, took a sip, and quietly, barely moving her lips, said, "You forgot one thing." Andrew stiffened. Rachel's smile vanished. They exchanged a glance. Margaret placed the glass gently on a side table. "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom." And she walked away, calmly. Down the path of wood and stone, the wind played with her hair. The sun was sinking beyond the horizon. And at that moment she already knew they would regret everything, and she wouldn't have to lift a finger. Margaret didn't go to the restroom, nor did she walk down to the shore. Instead, she stepped behind a pavilion and pulled out her phone from her purse. The screen was already blinking with an unread message from her notary. "Everything is done. Confirmations received. Delivery verified." She replied briefly. "Thank you. Proceed." 3 minutes passed, just enough time to walk back onto the beach path and look as though nothing had happened. Everything still looked the same at first. The music played, the reception buzzed, guests sipped cocktails in elegant dresses. But then a woman from the wedding planning team approached Andrew's parents at the front row with an envelope in hand. Moments later, similar envelopes were handed to 3 other guests, those whom Andrew had personally invited to the pre-wedding dinner. Sponsors, business partners, all opened their envelopes around the same time. At first, confusion, then flushed faces, and then the whispers began. "What is this? Is this real?" "It's signed by a notary." "Who's behind this?" Andrew, pale now, rushed to his father. His father, clutching the documents, hissed through gritted teeth, gesturing furiously for answers. Rachel stood frozen, her phone vibrating non-stop with alerts, emails, messages, phone calls. The entire financial system of their boutique, Veronica and Company, was frozen. Every account blocked, business access revoked. The directive had come from the legal owner holding the majority stake, Margaret. Long ago she had signed the documents quietly, just in case. Back then, it felt like a protective step, something to shield Rachel from financial risk. But now it had become her defense. Rachel spotted her mother. She broke into a near run across the stones in heels, her wedding dress trailing in the sand. "Mom, what's happening? Why did everyone get those letters? The boutique's frozen. What did you do?" Margaret met her eyes calmly. "I simply exercised my rights. I'm the majority owner. The documents are all signed and verified. Every action is legal." "You can't do this," Rachel gasped. "This is my life, our store, my wedding." Margaret's voice was low but unwavering. "And you never thought that treating your own mother like a burden wasn't business. It was betrayal." Andrew approached now, no longer composed, batting away phone calls. "Listen, let's talk. We can fix this. I'm sure we can find a way. Be reasonable." Margaret slowly reached into her purse and pulled out another envelope. "Here, an audit report. It covers everything you've done with boutique funds over the past year, and also a list of investors you brought in without my consent." "This is..." Andrew began, but didn't finish. A security staff member stepped up. "Excuse me, sir. Your father is requesting you immediately." And you as well, ma'am," he added, nodding to Rachel. "Mom, please," Rachel whispered. "I didn't mean to, I heard what you said earlier about the nursing home." Margaret cut her off. "You didn't respect me, you used me, but that was your choice, and now this is mine." "You'll lose everything too," Rachel hissed. "I'm not losing anything, Rachel," Margaret replied calmly. "I'm reclaiming my dignity. Everything else is just dust." She stepped around them and walked back up the path toward the exit. The wind fluttered her dress. She carried her sandals in her hand. Behind her, the waves kept crashing. Guests were already starting to drift away. The celebration was unraveling before their eyes. Waiting at the gate was a car. Behind the wheel sat her old friend Natalie, a lawyer, the same one who had helped prepare the documents. "Are you sure?" Natalie asked. "More than ever," Margaret replied as she got in. "Let's go." And they drove off, into a new life. The car rolled silently along the highway. The lights of the beachside town faded behind them. Margaret stared out the window at the darkening sky, thinking how quickly everything can collapse. "When you take off the mask, do you have everything ready?" Natalie broke the silence. "Yes," Margaret nodded. "All the paperwork is with the legal team. Everything's under control. I can disappear from their lives just like they wished. Only, not the way they planned." 2 hours later, they pulled up to a small cottage in the woods, near an old fishing village. The house was modest but cozy, purchased a year ago in Margaret's name, paid fully in cash. No one, except Natalie, knew about it. "You'll stay here?" Natalie asked. "For now. It's peaceful. No one yelling that I'm not their level." The house greeted her with the scent of pine and lavender sachets. She took off her coat, set down her bag, and turned on the light. Everything was just as she'd left it. Blankets, books, photographs from the past. Here she was safe. Here she was herself. She set the kettle to boil and pulled out an old photo album. Inside, her life, little Rachel in silly tights, her first days in a rented apartment, a picture from graduation where Margaret wore a worn blue dress and had tired eyes, but a proud smile. Tears welled, but didn't fall. She'd cried them all already, on the day she saw that Excel tab labeled Mom Management. Margaret hadn't screamed. She had gone to the notary. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, she reviewed tomorrow's task list. Everything was going according to plan. The boutique was frozen. The audit was scheduled. All unauthorized transactions documented. And strangely, she didn't feel triumphant. Just peace. For the first time in 20 years, real peace. The next day, the first news blurbs began to appear in the local media. Boutique Veronica and Company temporarily suspends operations amid financial dispute between investors. Social media buzzed. Some people pitied the tearful bride. Others condemned what they called manipulations by wealthy in-laws. But then a few voices started to remember something. They recalled the quiet woman who always accompanied the boutique's founder, the one who helped out after closing, the one who somehow was never mentioned. 2 days later, someone knocked on the cottage door. Margaret opened it and found Andrew. "May I?" he asked, voice hoarse, eyes tired. "That depends," she said calmly, not stepping away from the threshold. I just want to talk. No threats, no tricks." He raised his hands, like surrendering. "I understand I was wrong. Rachel is in shock. We both are. We crossed a line. You've destroyed—" "I didn't cross the line, Andrew," Margaret cut in. "I stood up. You just didn't expect that. You never imagined I would do anything but give and stay silent." He dropped his gaze. "I'm leaving town, and I wish you well." I hope you finally find peace." He turned and walked toward his car. Margaret closed the door and leaned her back against it. That wasn't repentance, that was surrender. Too late. But she no longer needed his remorse. She had her own. And it had already begun. 2 weeks passed. During that time, Margaret never called Rachel. Not once. Not out of anger, out of principle. Rachel knew where she was, but she didn't come. Good. If they had decided to erase their mother for the sake of their image, let them see it through. Natalie, ever methodical, executed every detail. Letters to all investors were sent, accounts frozen, inventory tracking stopped. The storefront of Veronica and Company stood dark. Shelves empty, doors closed, comments on Instagram disabled. The brand went silent. So did its founder. Then the phone rang. "Mom?" A weak voice on the other end. Margaret didn't answer at once. She simply listened. Seconds passed. "I'm sorry," Rachel finally said. "Truly, I get it now." "What exactly do you understand?" Margaret asked calmly. "That I acted terribly, that I devalued everything you did, that I let him control me. I was foolish." "You were an adult, Rachel, not foolish. You knew." "I was blind," her daughter replied. "I wanted so badly to belong to their world. I was ashamed of you. I hid you." "Apologize for that," Margaret thought, but said nothing. Rachel's sob reached her through the line. Margaret remained silent. No tears, no trembling. That silence carried more weight than any speech. "Will you come, at least?" Rachel asked. "So we can talk, in person. I don't want to lose you." "Rachel," Margaret said evenly, "you didn't lose me today. You lost me the day you created that spreadsheet titled Mom Management. The day you decided I was a liability, not a person, a resource." There was a long pause. "I'll come, but not for apologies. For closure. Closure matters too. Without it, nothing new can begin." Margaret went to her lawyer's office with printed emails, a folder full of documents, and a decision. She handed Natalie the paperwork, full transfer of her ownership, complete withdrawal from the company. With one clause, the assets would remain in Rachel's name. "You're sure?" Natalie asked, worried. "They deserve to crash," Margaret answered. "Yes, but I don't want to stand beside their wreckage. I want to stand beside what I build next, and not with them." "What comes next?" Natalie asked. "I'll open my own workshop, a small boutique for women my age, a place where shoes don't matter, where what's in your soul does." "Not Veronica and Company. Something real, something warm." She smiled, calm, for the first time in years, not as a cornered woman, but as a person choosing her path. 1 month later, the doors opened. The sign read simply, "Simple Things." No flashy mannequins. Instead, portraits of real women, those who had lived through life just like her, the ones who deserved respect, not tabs labeled Mom Management. The first customer was a woman around 60. She stepped in, looked around and said, "It smells like home in here." "Not like money." Margaret smiled, "And may it always stay that way." She didn't attend social events anymore, didn't answer calls from unknown numbers, didn't post on social media. She just lived. For the first time, truly lived. Simple things grew slowly, but steadily. Not through viral reels, but through real stories. Women shared it with each other, not because it was trendy, but because it made them feel seen. "Are you the Margaret everyone talks about?" a client once asked, a woman with silver curls and a scar on her forearm. "Rachel's mother, from the boutique." Margaret answered calmly, "I was." "I'm sorry," the woman replied, puzzled. A mother isn't just a title by biology. It's about how you're treated. If someone doesn't see you as family, why cling to the title? The woman stood quietly for a moment. "That's beautifully said," she whispered. "And honest." One evening, Margaret closed the shop late. Rain misted down. The sky hung low, heavy and grey. And there she was, Rachel, alone, wearing a dress they had once picked out together, back when we still meant something. "Hi, Mom." "Not Mom anymore," Margaret replied softly, locking the door. "Just Margaret." "I can't do this anymore," Rachel exhaled. "Everyone's turned their backs. David's gone. The business is falling apart. The investors want their money. I don't know how to keep going." "Did you ever know?" Margaret asked gently. Rachel looked down. "I'm sorry. For everything. For the way I spoke to you. For that spreadsheet. For the words. The silence." Margaret said nothing. The wind whispered through the trees. Raindrops traced paths across the shop's front window. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Rachel continued. "I just wanted you to know. I understand now. Too late, but I understand." "It is too late, Rachel." Margaret's voice wasn't angry, just final. "Not because I hold a grudge, but because there's more behind me than ahead of me, and I won't spend what's left of my life on something that's already dead." Rachel nodded. For the first time, not like a wounded girl, but as someone who truly felt remorse. "If you ever decide to be a person, not a performer, come find me, not for forgiveness, for truth." 6 months later, a letter arrived at Simple Things. Inside, a sheet of paper and a photo. The photo showed a storefront with a new sign, "Closed by Veronica and Company." And underneath, a handwritten note, "Now I'm building something real. Thank you for teaching me. Rachel." Margaret read it, placed it in a drawer, and never returned to it. In the spring, Simple Things held its first exhibit, Stories of Mothers. Each story honored a woman who had given without asking, built while everything else collapsed, loved even when she was unloved. And in the far corner hung a sign that read, "Sometimes, to become yourself, you have to lose the ones you loved most." Margaret stood by the window, cradling a cup of tea, watching women walk in. Ordinary, real, the very ones this place had been made for, and in that quiet, she felt it. Not defeat, survival, and more than that, a life rebuilt in a world with no room for betrayal. A year passed. Simple Things became more than a store. It was a space for those who weren't looking for discounts, but for meaning. Workshops were held there. Women of all ages came together, read letters, shared their pain, built something new from what had once been shattered. Margaret spoke little of the past. She just lived, for the first time, truly. One day, a young woman walked into the boutique. Around 25, wearing jeans, a backpack on her shoulders, and a face oddly familiar. "Excuse me, are you Margaret?" she asked shyly. "I am," Margaret said, not recognizing her. "My name is Anna. I've been looking for you. My mother, you once helped her, gave us shelter when we had nowhere else. I was just a baby then." A memory sparked. A tiny child with bright blue eyes. A woman with a bruised cheek. A snowstorm in the middle of the night. "You grew up," Margaret whispered. "Because of you," Anna smiled. "I live, I study, I'm not afraid. I just wanted to say thank you." A lump formed in Margaret's throat, not for the gratitude, but because someone had remembered, hadn't erased her, hadn't discarded her. "Come in," Margaret said. "We have cinnamon cookies today, just like the ones I used to bake when you were in diapers." Later that evening, after Anna left, Margaret pulled out an old notebook. On the first page, a yellowing scrap of paper she had written to herself years ago. Someday they'll understand, or they won't, but you must never forget who you are. Now she knew. Nothing had been in vain. Not a single sleepless night, not a single tear, not a single, "You're not good enough." They had tried to erase her from their lives, but she had built one of her own. And in that life, there was no room left for pain or bargains or pleading, only strength, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that simply walks forward, with a soft smile, a hot cup of tea, and full silence behind her.